Yeah, I was looking up some initial stuff on AI and wellness, and quickly went to the dimensions of the first. It's like, what is the dimensions of wellness, right? Which has mental, physical, social, spiritual aspects. It's like, okay, that's a decent set of categories, all big. And then this social aspect, what they broke down that to compatibility factors, right? Like knew how to, like your social health, it really depends on who you're with, whether you're compatible with that person or not.
And what, like, so the wellness is, wait, is it to be compatible with an AI or to be compatible with, it's
It's
AI
no,
to detect whether you're compatible with someone?
it doesn't go into that yet. It first it says, social is communication styles, relationship values, and social needs. And then to define further, it's like that has certain compatibility factors, right? Such as, complementary needs, which is, opposites attracts, introverted versus extroverted, right? What sort of values, core beliefs you have, like life goals, right? As well. And then the other is more practical things, like are you guys matching lifestyle, like to the daily routines, interests, activities match. And then it suggested chatbots.
Guessing in this, like, you want some things to be opposite and some things to be aligned, right?
It really depends, just knowing
Yeah.
from experience and observing, right? Some people find it really important to have opposites, and some find it important to be aligned to what you believe in, right? And to mix of both. Some, well, we could average it out by saying most prefer partners that have half and half, you know, some the same align with you, and like the other half, it's like completely opposite of you. So there's some sort of new exploration, some sort of newness, chemistry to this. Someone who thinks different from you from time to time, but not
Oh,
all the time, because that would drive you crazy. So that's what we observed. Yeah, and then it went to a section about chatbots, and it cited how some people are using chatbots to engage with understanding with themselves, like people who are going through depression. And apparently, chatbots in Eastern countries, users there, they definitely use stronger emotional words, such as depression in their
in Eastern countries.
Eastern countries. It makes
Okay.
sense. It makes sense because those who suppress, right, their emotions, etc., in a social person face-to-face context, they might have to they might not have people to talk to, and so they use chatbots to alleviate the issues. And they were saying it's an indication of just using stronger words than the West, like sadness, right, is another one. And let's yep, go on.
That's interesting. I think
Yep.
that's new information for me. So I would have thought, like, at least from what I know in India and stuff,
Mm,
like depression and all that, it's only been in the media and everywhere else since like 2013, 2014.
mm-hmm.
Like culturally, it's been a taboo to talk about depression before that, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Like you always portray the stoicism element.
Yes.
Yeah, but I guess you're right. It's because of this superficial curtain that they end up needing to go to chatbots, and maybe there's some kind of a taboo or shamefulness in going to a therapist. So
Mm-hmm.
they find chatbots to be a nice outlet.
Yep. Yep. So this is on similar to those aspects.
Mm.
And I'm just reading this bit where I'm trying to figure out where,
So one dimension is matching, one dimension is chatbots.
yep, and helping yourself understand um what is driving your moods, what are the triggers that you're feeling. And I'm trying to read this bit. I'm just reading a research paper that it recommended about how cultures respond to chatbots regards to using it for mental health, saying Western people have greater tendency to discuss topics such as death and swear words. It's as in it's more sensitive topics. I guess
Wait,
Asians don't.
swear words are more sensitive topics.
That's how they gauge. I think swear words, the use of swear words, as in this is Western culture, as in I guess being used on them. My thoughts, or they find themselves using swear words, but that's not as interesting as death. Like more openly talking about death, as in grieving, I guess, right? Death in the family, or maybe considering suicide than
And
Eastern
that for
cultures.
me makes a lot of sense as well, because like in
Interesting.
Eastern cultures, death is quite commonly addressed early on. Like it's a part of the religion to talk about death, right?
Mm. So they don't need to, as in people wise, right? It's like socially okay to talk about death.
Or in the sense that you death is not hidden away from the limelight in Eastern cultures. Like it's
Mm.
like because of Buddhism, Hinduism, and all
Mm.
these
Yeah.
pervading cultures, like death is quite early on addressed as something that is just a part of a cycle, for example.
Yeah.
And especially in Hinduism, like you see cremations quite early on in your life. And that
Mm.
is your like jolt into observing death, dealing with death in a super fast way.
Mm.
And I think Western cultures for a long time, like Christianity, because of Western religions and stuff like that, I think it has a very different mindset on death. And as a result, I think maybe, for example, they're more open talking about their mental health. But when it comes to death, they're probably more nuanced, and
Mm.
they're figuring out how to navigate the temporary nature of life, let's say.
Mm. 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 And I wonder in that case, then, when you say nuance, they have a better vocabulary for grieving, or speaking about, afterlife, or is there no afterlife, and things like that, to help them relieve themselves of that process of grieving.
You mean what I think about the Western world or the
uh,
Eastern world?
Eastern world. Like, I'm just thinking there's probably better ways, because they talk about it so much and so openly. The vocabulary describing the nuances of how you grieve
Yeah.
perhaps is better.
Yeah. And it also kind of accepts that it's okay to grieve in a way.
Mm.
And
It's,
at least
yeah.
in the context of death, in the context of
Yeah.
depression, it's completely hypocritical. But in
Mm.
the context of death, I think it's dealt with quite early, and you're kind of shown that life is temporary and you're not taking anything beyond this universe and stuff like that. And you
Mm.
have concepts such as nirvana, the cycle of life, samsara,
Mm.
and these are all revolving about in different cultures you might have a heaven or hell. In other cultures you might have like the circuitous nature of life.
Mm.
And within Eastern cultures itself, like they address both of these. So yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. It's really dependent on, definitely on culture and how do we engage with chatbots and AI.
It's
When
interesting, huh? So anything that is open to speak about in culture, like anything that's probably not open to be spoken about, is kind of where chatbots come into play.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, I mean, in the West, just to contrast the Western culture with regarding death and grieving, there are a number of shows which are quite realistic in that I've seen about grieving and delayed or holding back grieving, and it causes so much trouble. It's part of the whole part of the drama is that one comes to mind, although it's not an actual death. It's a show about how a boy's dad is going through the operation where he transitions to become a woman, right? And even before that, it was just a consideration when his dad declared that he wanted to be a woman. The boy was just lashing out in different ways on how he expresses by sleeping with women and treating them poorly. And it turned out that he was grieving the death, quote unquote, of his father, the father that he knew, because he's turned into a completely different person to become a she. Yeah,
Hmm.
the series is called Transparent, and
Okay.
it's quite. I love the title because it includes the word trans, as well as it's about transparency of the communication or the lack of, and how it builds towards that, towards the understanding. and it's a Jewish culture. It's a Jewish family,
Okay.
and so that adds to another layer, and also adds to the comedic factor as well. So
Yeah, I've noticed
yeah,
also like the Jewish cultures are quite similar to Indian cultures when it comes to closely knit families, how
yeah,
much basically
for
family
sure,
has
for sure.
control over your life. I think
Yeah,
Arab
yeah.
cultures are also quite similar.
Yes, and it's in a way I'm trying to figure out ways to categorize it. It's either from the same region or they're from tribes that are very strong with their own traditions, and perhaps the issue or consistency of needing to survive in very harsh environments, and hence family is pretty much your means of survival.
I think so. My theory with this, I know we're getting into something completely not AI related, but my theory with this is actually due to the modern day growth in these various countries, and in a lot of countries around that region, Asia, we all got freedom quite late in the 1900s, in the 1980s. That's where
Mm,
like that whole region got liberated. So it's been like ingrained in your DNA, not genetically, but ingrained in your culture to depend on your near ones. And because the government wouldn't offer you much, basically, like it was quite used to, these cultures were used to the governments being the oppressors. And where you see like a more open society for longer from the 1700s, America, United Kingdom, where you could offload some of your problems to the government. Like you can receive social support from the government, you can receive
yeah.
financial support from the government. I think that's where like the dependence on family is less ingrained in society. Like it's an option that you can like you subscribe to rather than a necessity.
How interesting. Wow. We just realized that, the individual freedoms doesn't necessarily guarantee your ability to express everything, where it does require element of religion to discuss something like death, like Western cultures they have to discuss with a chatbot. And I guess it's a realm where it's still uncertain. Yeah, it requires that element. Jumping along just to the other aspects of this study, it actually says the comparison of topics with between social media, like just chatting amongst people or whatever
Mm-hmm.
you post versus to chatbots, that the topics doesn't necessarily require support from others. Like they know it is a robot or it is not a person. So they, when it comes to, getting advice on daily life activities, right? Or going through daily difficulties, they sometimes, yeah, will reach out to people in social media instead. Kind of reminds me of the movie Her, where the main character actually relies on both the AI and with people as well. Like it was a scene where he had trouble
Yeah.
sleeping and someone else had trouble sleeping and they had, a sex chat and it was with a real person. And I could see how he needed like the differences of both, like because he understands that in the end there's not a person in the other side. Perhaps just the imagination of a robot would be, or a machine is just, it leads to other things. But yeah, but then again, that's the whole point of the film, how he started moving away from depending on people because they're not dependable,
Hmm.
to someone who's always consistently there. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and I
social
think
media, yeah, is not necessarily 100% dependable.
yeah, and this is the nature of life, right? People come in and go out all the time, and people have different journeys, and sometimes your journeys unite, and then you follow a path together. But sometimes, like it's just for a fleeting moment, right? And I've started seeing these subreddits. I forget which subreddit that fascinated me recently. It was a question asked to all of Reddit, so it's probably Ask Reddit. It's like, what kind of encounters do people like? And I think the top quoted one was what someone called, I don't remember the exact terminology that person used, but it was what someone called a fleeting moment, in my words. It's
Really?
like it's like you meet someone, you have a great conversation with someone, you might be doing some activities, you do those activities, You might be doing something else, and at the end of it, you just decide to say goodbye, and sometimes you don't even know the person's name. So it's like, let's say, going to a bar or a cafe and meeting someone, and you have a nice conversation, and then you say, okay, yeah, bye, and not exchanging numbers or something at the end. It's almost like saying that, hey, it's the recognition in life that there are going to be these moments where you can enjoy, and they are those moments, and you're in the right place at the right time, but it's not that they're going to constantly repeat themselves. So it comes back to the ephemerality of everything, and that was the most top voted one. And it was in a weird way very beautiful to see that come out of Reddit.
Interesting.
And this is not in the same vein as like a one night stand or something. This is more in the vein of you appreciate the temporal nature of life and people moving in and out.
Jeez. Interesting. I say this because Japanese culture appreciates fleeting moments all the time. It's quite embedded, and they celebrate it, and they know life is temporary. And in the TV series Shogun, it was saying how the origins of this is because they're always under constant earthquakes, and so death can just be imminent. It's like your life is quite quickly there, and then suddenly you're not there anymore. And
Asi's life.
It's satellite. It's like the comets that pass around. It comes once 1,000 years and just cycles back, and every 1,000 years it's already several lifetimes. So it is those type of moments.
Yeah, and especially the Japanese culture, right? They address this in beautiful ways. The fusion of the Zen Buddhism and Japanese culture, and some concepts from adjacent forms of Buddhism adjacent. Like in Japan, they also have a concept called Wabi-Sabi.
Yes.
And Wabi-Sabi is finding the beauty in imperfection. So it kind of elevates asymmetry, and you're intentionally looking for things that are just off. Whether that may be a rock, or maybe a teapot, or maybe like a certain kind of friendship. It beautifies that whole concept into this thing called Wabi-Sabi. At least for me, this has been a concept that I've been quite obsessed with personally. Which is it's been like the first time I heard it was 15 years ago, and it stuck to me for life.
What? Okay, you need to explore this a bit. We want this a bit.
One aspect of Wabi-Sabi is teapots, So in Japan, teapots are quite famous. Not famous, quite a big part of your culture, right? And people have teapots passed down to them for generations. And their family takes care of that teapot. And sometimes these teapots break, right? And in Japan, there's a whole industry about how to refix the teapots to do the right kind of artistic work on them. And you want to recover the exact same teapot. You don't want to buy a new teapot because it's a part of your family heirloom or whatever. In this like recovery process or restoration process, there's like two paths, let's say. One path is to recover it just like before. So they hide the cracks. But the most common way is to show those cracks and in a way pronounce those cracks, make them loud and clear. So that it's a part of the journey of the teapot. You know that the teapot was cracked once, and there is beauty in that. There's a story in that. I like that.
Okay.
It's like holding your scars and showing your scars as you move along in life.
So expand that into your mentioning of friendships and relationships. How does that extend to that?
So in a way, it is like, I think younger on, I had this notion that like friendships and relationships have to fit a certain bucket. Like they have to be very square, and this is what you expect out of a friend, let's say.
Yeah.
Or these are the standards you hold your friends onto, and you hold your better half onto. And I think that is that still sticks on in this new paradigm, but in a different way. Like you expect the person to have the right intent and the right spirit, but then they carry their own experiences in their life. They carry their own lived past. and therefore they move forward in their own unique way, which potentially is compatible with you. And there is a beauty in them being different from you.
Mm,
And that difference comes from apart from what they've seen in the past, right? And apart from the pain that they've gone through and the person they've become as a result. So
mm.
there is a beauty in observing that and a beauty in having that imperfection in people as well. And
Okay. Just there's some concerns that I have is that you're jumping into someone who might be this. I'm not really sure, 100% sure what you're really describing and the beauty of the differences, or let's just say someone who's been through a lot of trauma and from their previous relationships,
Mhm.
and then suddenly shows up in your life, and their lived experience sometimes might prejudge you, like they could project whatever they feel, what they've learned onto you.
Yeah,
And
I think that's why there's the balance, the balance, right? Like there's, and this also I've learned the hard way. Like there are boundaries that you should draw for your own self. And in a
yes.
way, this is recognizing the imperfection in you as well, right? And like your trigger points, and you recognize them and you say, hey, okay, I'm not perfect. I have these imperfections, and therefore I do not accept certain things.
Mm.
And like, I think there's a healthy balance between accepting things that are within the means of your self respect, the right kind of imperfections, basically.
The
And
ones
in
that
a
you can
way,
handle, basically.
yeah, yeah.
Not the ones that you cannot, or the ones that really warp the way you are. And I also I thought we could circle back into the
Yeah.
chatbots here.
Yeah.
Right.
So what else are we saying about chatbots?
Wow, we explore a bit of that. So yeah, we just mentioned that it's chatbots gives a safe space, like a genuine safe space where there's absolutely no judgment, or you don't
Hmm.
feel like there's any judgment, and it allows them to be more open to share their emotional self, be more vulnerable, oddly,
Hmm.
because we're in a society where most people are judgmental, or they have to declare that I'm not judging you. We have to use the word safe space as a result of that, like just a declaration. Although I find it, I would press the BS button on that whenever at work someone says this is a safe space, and this is like in a middle management discussion amongst like 50 or 60 middle managers. I was like, no, this is not a safe space, mate. You will judge me if I say something. And yeah, they just blanket say it without really realizing it. Yeah. So it does, I think there's an avenue to this where it would help with them people with themselves open further. That's like the first step, of therapy, which is to surface it all out by actually saying it and then recognizing it and then exploring it. Because sometimes people don't understand their emotions. And maybe when they talk through it and then have a chatbot guide through them, well, actually, the first point is having them open up. And so, because it's not a person at the other end or someone that is incompatible with them, that is, gauging with them. I know what I mean by incompatible is false judgments, judgments that don't make sense. There's judgments that make sense, that someone completely understands you, and then
Hmm.
hence it's actually good sound, critical feedback or just feedback. And then those that just see you in a different light, and like what they perceive is something they judge completely differently, and it's not useful for you because their lifestyle is not as the same as your lifestyle.
So what I think about chatbots is basically they're very good yes ministers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're very good in listening to you. They're very good in like going down the path, like the mental path that you want to explore. They're not very good in like pointing you the other way. So,
What's the
and
other
this is
way?
not just so. For example, I was talking to a chatbot. Um, it was ChatGPT the other day, and I was exploring an idea to write a book, and I was having basically a conversation, almost like a market expert with the chatbot. Hey, I'm thinking about writing like this. What do you think? And it always says, "Oh, this is a great idea. This could mean so much," and stuff like that. And this is what I mean. Like, they're very good in agreeing to what you want and not necessarily getting the right answer. And right at the end of the conversation, I spent 1 hour. We explored chapters and stuff like that. And then I realized, like, hey, it's just playing along with everything that I want to say. So I want to specifically task it with critiquing the idea. And I tasked it with critiquing the idea. And then it started revealing a lot of
You
reservations.
criticize it.
I
Okay.
asked it to criticize the idea because I wanted a good understanding of whether it makes sense or not just like, hey, pat in the back, go ahead, good idea. And turns out it's pretty good in that, but it's only good when you specifically ask it to critique stuff. And this is what I think the role of chatbots in mental health is. Like, sometimes you just want a person to talk to, and that's where I think chatbots are great. But sometimes if you want to get to a root cause for a problem that you're having, and that's what you want to get out of a conversation, I don't think chatbots are the best for that, because they're not going to reveal parts of you that you don't want to express.
Wow. Unless you criticize it, you're saying that's the way to unlock it.
You task it, not you don't criticize it.
You
You
task it to
task
to
you task it to criticize you or your idea, your what you're saying. So you task it to play good cop, bad cop. That's the only way. Because by default, it's always playing good cop.
my God, this reminds me so much of my corporate environment right now. I constantly think of the term toxic positivity. Like, they cannot deal or handle certain people. Well, most people in certain departments, I know they cannot deal with criticism or any sort of negativity or discussing any sort of issues. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, let's keep this positive. Like, you can't, someone just explained to one of my colleagues, asked a person, it's like, how you feeling? And the person said, I'm okay. And it's like, just okay. It's better if you lighten the mood and say you're great. Just tell people you're doing great, right? And then this person suddenly picks up this value, and it's like, and so I asked her, how do you feel? And she's like, it's great. I was like, where'd that come from? And then she told me the story of this toxic positivity, and it's like,
But
suddenly,
this is there in a lot of workplaces.
sorry,
It's there in a lot of workplaces.
was that a
Me
question or
myself,
a statement?
it was a statement.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
it
well, at
depends on
least,
who I'm talking to at work. I would say I'm okay or I'm doing fucking amazing.
and this is just like, you could gauge. This is a good tool to gauge, like, who are you able to be, vulnerable with, or to have an actual conversation. So what we found, and what my experience is through, startups where they have a runtime of, like, a limited time of, because of the investment they have is limited. They have to talk about the problems quickly. And if they don't talk about it and trying to maintain this positivity and shove this under the carpet, as you say, it pretty much, the problems doesn't get addressed at
Yeah.
all. So nothing is
And,
progressing.
and sometimes you just want someone to talk to, right? And that time it's
Sure.
great. Like, that's why like helplines are super useful, because they're not going to sit and solve the problem. They're alleviating the pain that you have right now, right?
Mm.
And one of my friends actually volunteers in one of these helplines. It's a suicide helpline for transgendered or transsexual people.
Hmm.
I was just curious about how, like, what actually goes down in these helplines. And quite typically, apparently, it's just that people are quite overwhelmed.
Hmm.
Um, and there's so many thoughts running through their mind, and they don't really know what to do.
Of
And this
course.
often leads to very bad next steps. And that's where the helpline comes into play. And all the helpline is tasked with is spending time with the person till they start feeling better. Just someone to talk to, almost like a brother or a sister
Hmm.
who you can just like lean on, and you don't really require an answer. You just require to talk to someone. And
Hmm.
this is where I think the chatbots could be quite useful, because I have experienced things in the past as well where I've just required to talk to someone, maybe not as intense, but yeah, and just exchanging a few sentences goes a long way, in my opinion.
That's just definitely a skill set that I need to learn or always constantly learning. It's the problem of the classic dude where we jump straight into solutionizing or solutions rather than just listen.
Hey,
And
dude, you're a product person. You're probably really good at identifying problems.
well, this is the interesting thing about guys, right? We're very goal oriented. If you dangle some money, like a salary that the goal is to listen to a person, yeah, pay me and I'll listen very well. They
True
actually
that.
did an experiment on this. Brene Brown's very eminent TED Talk speaker about vulnerability, how they were saying gender wise, right? Women are better listeners than men, etc. And so they tried this experiment where they did a control where their active listening skills of the different genders, for sure, showed that women are better, right, at listening before they start jumping into saying something. But if you change up the experiment and offer the men money, they actually were better, listeners than women, because probably women don't value money as much, and they turn it into a task oriented thing. That's
Okay.
where I derived that from. Then that's a
So
reflection on
always, so never do free therapy, right?
never do free therapy. Wow, what a thought. Like for the people who constantly use their friends as therapists, yeah, you know, they might be not actively listening as a therapist. Well, that's another avenue that we should explore later.
I'm
Wow.
curious to also explore the other aspects, the non-mental aspects as well. But once you're done with this chatbot line, we can look into those as well.
Sure, I think we can go into that. What is the thing that
So
you're
I
thinking about?
so I've opened up this blog article which like summarizes wellness in multiple dimensions. So there's one aspect which is mental health, and a large part of that is mental health support.
Mm-hmm.
And a large part of that mental health support lies in chatbots getting better and being more personalized, basically. But apart from that, I think there's also the whole physical aspect of things, which is your health, physical health. And some of that comes from nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So there are apps or algorithms around nutrition that are more tailored to what you expect.
Mm.
And already I think ChatGPT is quite good at pumping out a diet plan for you
Mm.
based on at least the knowledge that you give it. It doesn't have access to your metrics, but yeah. And then the second layer of that is actually connecting up some metrics. So Apple Health, for example, has been great for me in motivating me. It preemptively bumps my fitness goals when I hit it too consistently. So it knows when to level up. It also alerts me on trends. So if like currently I'm on a weight loss journey, so it reminds me, hey, your weight has been this for the last 6 weeks.
Whoa.
Or your heart rate has gone up, or your body metabolic rate has gone down. So it shows you not just the point in time, but the overall trend.
Mm.
And I think that's super useful as well. And then there are situations where these kind of algorithms, time series algorithms, can also alert you for something critical. So there is this arterial the thing when you have arrhythmic heartbeats. I forget what that thing is called. And it's a sign that, okay, you're going through either too much stress or something's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just arrhythmia. There's another one when it happens suddenly. It could be a sign of an early onset of a heart attack or something. And Apple Health is, you can activate it on your watch, and then it monitors your data to see whether you have any kind of things. And I've known many people who have checked themselves into ER, not because of health reasons, but because their Apple Watch told them to, and they were really good preemptive, like life-saving things to do,
Mm.
because physically they felt exactly the same. Mentally, they don't know what they were going through.
Mm.
And by just checking themselves in and getting an ECG done on them, they could prevent a lot of serious issues. And then there's
Wow.
the whole, so this is like point in time analysis, and then there's the whole trend analysis where I was telling you about, but that also comes into monitoring your sugar levels and stuff. So right now you have wearables that can even monitor your oxygen levels, your sugar levels. I think all of these become super useful as we move forward in the full spectrum of wellness.
Let's just dive back there. Were you saying your friends are checking themselves into ER for heart conditions? And you're not that old, Prash. And who are these friends and what are they experiencing? Is
Okay,
this the
these are not
world of
friends.
startup?
These were no, no, no. This is Reddit actually.
Okay.
The ease of this conversation.
These are your Reddit friends.
Actually, they're Reddit posts. They're not even friends. But yeah, and sleep. Oh yeah, we didn't get into sleep at all. Because of these variables, I think sleep has come back into the forefront. I think the modern
Yes.
day, like the millennials and the Gen Zs, forgot this whole dimension about sleep till the Gen Zs brought it back maybe 5, 6 years ago. Now you have the rings, the watches, you have the fit bands. They all monitor your sleep, and there's this whole sleep score optimization that's going on.
Yep.
And I think that is brilliant because I think sleep is one of the most underrated, natural, the beautiful things you can do to your body as it
Yep.
recovers from most things mental and physical in that process.
Yep. 100%. A lot of it stems, I think, from this book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It was published, it was a New York Times bestseller in 2018. And what was
Okay.
one of the biggest things that I got out of the book was that we have a limited number of hours in our life, right? Where our brain needs sleep. And if we don't sleep, right,
Hmm.
that will come back at you in the form of dementia or
Dementia.
yeah, or Alzheimer's. And one known notable aspect of Margaret Thatcher is that she is famously just proud of just needing 3 hours of sleep. And she suffered, dementia in the last years of her life, right? And it's because she didn't give, well, according to the book, people who push out sleep or neglect sleep, they don't let their brain, recover, or it's just the limited hours that we have of awake time that we just need to sleep. It's almost like I wonder if it's the same as the limited number of heartbeats we all have. Did you know about this fact about heartbeats? Just a side note about biology here, where all mammals, well, they found experiments in mammals. I learned this from a Natural
Have
History
a
Museum.
limited number of
Number of
heartbeats.
heartbeats, and it's all the same number. It's roughly the same. And the reason what determines their lifespan is how fast they beat. So
Mm,
a mouse has shorter lifespans because their heart rate is a lot higher than ours. And whales and, bigger animals, their heart rates are much slower so they could live a longer time.
that makes so much sense. And that makes so much sense in like athletic people as well, who train to go up at higher heartbeats, but then their resting heartbeat is much lower and they spend most of their, like, you don't spend most of your time doing activities, you spend most of your time not doing activities in life.
Mm.
And as your resting heartbeat comes slower, you live longer.
Mm. Mm.
I've
Mm. Mm.
also, I don't know whether you've seen this TV show called The Blue Zone. The
The
Blue,
what? Say that one more time. How do you spell it?
I think it's called The Blue Zone or
Blue
The
zone. Oh,
Blue,
right. People
yeah.
who live along in certain geographic areas that live a long time.
Yeah, so the blue zones in the world are around. There's Okinawa in Japan,
Yes.
Noro in Italy, um, Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, Icaria in Greece, Loma Linda in California. The,
California.
so there are these 5 places which are like probably the most famous blue zones. There are more places. And one thing that connects them all is not geography, it's not religion, it's not food habits. There is something about food, I'll come back to that later, but it's not the same kind of food that they eat. It's not the same kind of culture, like religion, everything is different.
Hmm.
Physique is quite different as well. So there's nothing in genetics over there. Turns out that they have a very like the common thread, at least according to me, is their attention to life. They pass through life attentively, and this might be enjoying and spending time with their close ones,
Mm-hmm.
enjoying and spending time gardening, enjoying and spending time cooking a big meal.
Mm.
So there are aspects of food in each one of them. So, for example, I think in California there's blueberries in their diet. In Japan, there is this whole community nature. So once you hit East, there's the community well-being center,
Mm.
and people are always sitting on the floor. So there's a general sense of certain exercises that happen throughout their life
Mm.
as well. Like in Italy, they walk up and down the hill even in their 90s.
Yep,
Um,
yep, yep.
in Italy, they love having a big family meal. And if you were to have that meal today, you would say, hey, it's so carb rich.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually true. It's a good carb meal. And it's the act of eating it with people you love
Mm.
and the act of spending time with people you love. I think that goes beyond. And that I think is a more common thread that you see. There's a strong sense of community and a healthy community in these places.
Yep. Definitely during COVID, one of the quotes I've heard from a therapist was that your mental health is now really defined by the people that you have immediate communication with, right?
Mm.
Your inner circle. And I wonder if that circles back to sleep. Like if you have a healthy set of relationships, you don't have to bring it into, you know, the stress into your sleep and having to drain yourself just thinking about it. And then you start dreaming about these problems as well. That you're actually more relaxed if your, social issues are dealt with or not apparent to begin with. I wonder if that's linked. There's of course
100%.
many variables to this, right? But I wonder if that's one aspect. Because I'm just thinking, that's what you think about when you're worried about some important person in your life. You bring it to your sleep, right? It's
Mhm.
hard to just clunk out. Just think about these things. What keeps you up at night? Is a common question, and usually it's
Yeah.
involving some other
And I think
person.
it comes to sleep, it comes to even your appetite, you know,
Oh yeah,
it
what
comes
you
to,
eat. Yeah,
yeah.
it affects, what you eat. Whether you're consciously trying to satiate, certain foods that you have a craving for to fulfill those stresses that you have, or, you know, you're consciously eating something healthy. And it's always a deadly spiral for everything because whatever you eat, then your gut bacteria forms and it craves for that certain thing, right? Again, and yeah, you're screwed if your gut bacteria only craves for horrible things.
Yeah, and I know the hard way. For the last, I think, so that there was this craving in me for, I think, since I started earning money at a job.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I think my brain was like, hey, you can eat anything you want now that you earn money.
What does
And
that
I
mean?
think for 6 years or 7 years, I craved paneer every 2 days or 3 days because this was the exotic food when I was growing up.
Paneers, cheese.
Yeah, paneer is cheese. So like we wouldn't make paneer at home. It's traditionally a North Indian thing, and then I'm from South India, so we would go out, and anytime we would go out, I would pick paneer because I liked it a lot. But that would be like once a month or maybe once in 2 months,
Mm,
and then it just moved to a time where I started having that every day
mm,
since 2016. And that stacks up the kilos. And I think it's more about the craving and more about the the voidness that you fill with paneer.
mm. You must have had a happy time with paneer.
Oh, I definitely did.
It's
I had a
associated with something. Yeah, go on.
potentially, yeah, it's associated with something, and people noticed me putting on the kilos, and I noticed myself putting on the kilos, and I would call it the happy tires
Yeah,
because
good
it's just
investment.
yeah. Yeah, but that's changed. I think there's a definite thing also coming back to like aspects of health that were not that have been making a comeback because of technology. I think one of them is also your gut. There's more research happening on your gut these days.
Mm.
And there's this whole microbiome concept, which is basically talking about your gut being the key to everything,
Yep.
including sleep, including happiness, including chemicals that trigger your happiness. Prior knowledge was that most of these chemicals came out from the brain, so the
Mm-hmm.
brain was an important thing. But turns out, with new research, experimental research, they're starting to find out that these signals that go to the brain actually originate in the gut, and the gut sends out signals that then the brain responds correspondingly.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
like, the gut is also in charge of your happiness, is also in charge of your sadness, and also in charge of your sleep. And in a way that kind of like makes sense, right?
Totally.
The way to a man's heart is through the stomach.
Interesting way of summarizing it. I was thinking about my bad habits of eating late at night, and it really screws with my sleep. So yeah, it's something I need to look into.
Yeah, so I think, coming back to this multidimensional wellness thing, I think AI is here to help with all of these, right?
Mm.
Basically, it offers a layer of intelligence onto data. That's the way I look at it. And now that we have more data sources connected to our body and more things we can track, this layer of intelligence becomes better. And in certain ways, I believe that it's going to outshine these massive sample based researches that have happened in the past. Because coming out with, hey, this is the perfect amount of protein that you need to eat for the whole world is actually an incorrect way of dealing with your diet problem. Instead, you want something personalized to your culture, to your genetics, to your metabolism. And I think AI offers a great way of doing that.
Okay. Interesting aspect here. I'm about to come with a counter on this.
Go on.
AI really depends on data, and if the actual research, let's recognize the scientists who did all these pulling out of data points, right? You know, there are different levels of research. One that are quite individual level, like they just have, let's say, 50 or 100 people. And then there's also the meta research, the literature review that reads all these, little individual datas and then come up with something, right? And then there's ones that could afford like thousands of people over like years, like the twin studies, etc. And I assume I will need to depend on these research papers. Actually, the start of this conversation, how I came upon the recommendation of AI was because it was, if I clicked into it, and it was actually a research paper. So I wonder, when it comes to outshining the research, can it actually do it without, let's say, do we need research in place for it to derive this from, or can it just derive things on its own, is really my question.
I think so. Where we are with AI today, I think it requires the research to happen beforehand. It requires a foundation to build upon. The way I look at it, it can't do the first principles solutions from scratch. It can do the tweaking, in my opinion. So it needs to know, for example, what is a good BMR, what is a good BMI, for example.
Yep.
And then it can help you optimize towards that as a combination of your diet, as a combination of your fitness, based on ailments you're going through, etc. But then it can't really do that if it doesn't know where to end up, like what it's trying to optimize for, which is a good BMI in this case. So I think AI does require all the science that's happened till this point. But there's the benefit it kind of offers beyond that is now that you can tweak it and customize it to your individual needs. As someone is like, everyone is a small bit of an outlier in this data point, right? Not anyone is the average human being by any means, right? And something would always be off by someone. Coming back to the Wabi-Sabi, right? It might be their metabolic rate is too low, too high. It might be that they process food differently. It might be that they're predisposed to some heart conditions, etc. So to optimize for that, I think AI is slightly better than just general theories. It almost takes the role of a very personal doctor. So I think still like a personalized doctor, best, AI next, and then just generally following research trends.
I like to ask the, practically you've used AI to recommend nutrition, and you're saying it's now moving towards, personalization. So how did you feed it data? Do you actually show AI what you're eating? You as in, or not show, like you write it in, etc. Because there's apps that actually, the food tracking that, track your calories. You get input simply by taking a photo of the barcodes of the things you eat. Well, of course, that's processed foods, or when you take a photo of your plate, perhaps it knows what you're eating. How do you feed it that information? How does it personalize for you?
Yeah, so this is the layer of integration that I found slightly difficult lately. So sure, you have these disparate apps. So on one end, I have I've used MyFitnessPal before,
Mm-hmm.
and this offers you ways of registering your calories. There's also like Noom, etc. On the other hand, my weighing machine is connected up to Apple Health,
Mm-hmm.
and so I track my weight every day, and not just the weight, but also metrics like the base metabolic rate, the BMI,
Mm.
the body fat percentage, all that stuff. Now, all of these maybe get synchronized on Apple Health, but Apple Health's intelligence is not that great. Like it's good enough to give you trends,
Mm-hmm.
but it won't give you any layer of better intelligence on top of that. So quite often I just like screenshot the data and then send it to ChatGPT.
Mm.
Like I screenshot like a 6 month data or download it in whatever form
Yep.
and then send it to ChatGPT and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing right now. I'm following this diet. I'm having this many grams of protein every day, along with all this data from MyFitnessPal. And this is the trend that I can see on my weighing scale.
Mm-hmm.
What's my next step, basically?
Mm.
And I leave it kind of open ended, so I receive a bunch of like ideas more than anything else. Like it might be things to do around fitness, it might be things to do around health, and then I can mix and match what works for me.
Mm. Okay. All right.
I think ChatGPT is great. It's great for even saying this is the diet I've followed so far. I'm thinking about switching to this diet. What are your risks, right? And
Okay.
sometimes there are risks, like especially when you're doing like weight loss and stuff and you're hammering some protein, there are things you got to be careful about, like your kidney and stuff.
Yes.
So that's better to like it's better to balance that and good to talk to AI about.
So okay, I was already thinking about workflows. It's at the moment quite a batch process where there's, real time you're collecting information, but when you feed it to AI, it's in a batch process and just waiting for it to do the research and stuff. You don't need it to be real timing, offering you advice. Like Apple Health is already good enough to give you that sort of reminder,
Yeah, I
which is,
treat it like a doctor.
yeah.
Like you have a session with the doctor once a week or once a month.
Mm.
That's the way I like. Here are my reports, and please do your analysis.
Yep. I mean, I wouldn't say most, some part of the doctor training is, based on flow, or, flow, a decision flow. If you have this, it's like if statements basically.
Yeah.
And so,
Couple of
yeah,
hacks about this around this is, if possible, use the same chat. So open a dedicated chat on ChatGPT just for health tracking. Use
okay.
the same chat so it has context of your previous things. It's the same thing as going to a doctor. There are
Mm,
ways around it. Like if you open up a different chat, make sure you export it and re-show it to ChatGPT. The other way you can do this is make sure it registers in memory certain things. So you can even prompt it to say, hey, save this in memory. So that
well,
way it has
okay.
context in your other chats as well. And maybe you're exploring something completely different about your gym routine and it has context about your
Wow. You create a portfolio file on yourself, just like the doctors. Okay. Does this, let's say practically for our audience, did it require any special subscriptions to hold into for ChatGPT to have this capability, or you could just rock up to ChatGPT now and just start
I
that?
believe you can do that in the free one. There are some limitations on how much you can interact with ChatGPT, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
think for this kind of usage, you're never going to hit any kind of maximum.
Okay.
So you can do it for free. I personally have a plus subscription, so I don't really think about how much I'm chatting.
Yep. How much is that? A plus subscription?
It's 20 quid a month,
Mm,
$80 a month, I think, plus VAT. So
mm,
23 or something.
okay. All right.
It's definitely worth it. It's way cheaper than going
PT,
to six
nutrition,
doctors.
nutritionist plus doctor. Doctors are like,
And sometimes it's, so I've started using the search feature as well,
mm-hmm.
especially like, let's say I go to the gym and let's say I'm new to a particular activity. Like, for example, most recently, what I've been exploring is deadlifting. There is a little bit of unknown stuff about lifting at all for me. So I use machines, but I've not started lifting big
Yep,
weights myself.
yep.
And I don't know the etiquette. Hey, how do you put the bar down? How much noise is okay to make? How much noise is not okay to make?
Noise.
Like when you put the bar down, like, do you
Yeah.
bang it? Do you leave it slightly?
It's more like your back, your spine, and make sure that's protected.
Yeah. What do you need to be careful about? If I'm going to start today, what's a decent weight I can start with? And like, how do I like basically use the machine, right? How do I lock things in place, the weight in place to make sure it doesn't fall down, all that stuff. And I've been using ChatGPT's search feature, the web search feature,
Mm.
to actually point me to some YouTube tutorials. Because if I typically search on YouTube saying, hey, this like show me fitness tutorials or something like that, I just get the things that are useful for people who are already doing it, not for a beginner. And I just can't find the right set of keywords that would help you get to the beginner level videos. But ChatGPT helps me. Sometimes written form is better than videos as well because you can just see the points listed.
Didn't the gym give you some sort of induction on your first day there? I'm joking,
They
by the way.
showed me the machines, but you just have that much time.
I mean, there's gyms these days. I just because you basically check in yourself, and it's all self-running. There's no staff really, or minimal staff.
Yeah, my
So
gym's
and
like that. It's 24 hours.
it minimizes, yeah, it makes it cheaper for everybody because it's salaries is definitely more expensive. It's the recurring cost versus the equipment itself. I'm curious as to why you chose ChatGPT as your main thing. Have you tried other platforms? Because there's Gemini, there's Llama, right?
I'm pretty sure they're all similar, to be honest. In certain ways, they might have certain things that work and certain things that don't work, but they're all similar. I chose ChatGPT just because I had a subscription with them and it's my one-stop solution. And I always know that like there are times where the competition edges out to be better. Like Anthropic every few months releases a new feature which makes it better than
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT. It just like I have what do you call? I'm just a customer who doesn't want to think. It's like using my iPhone. I could use my iPhone for the rest of my life, or
Mm.
I could switch an Android phone every 2 months. So yeah. It's just that I don't want to think about is the better solution using something else. There are, however, personalized AI chatbots or apps even to do purely health related stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath, they might use ChatGPT, but they prompt it pretty well, and there's a whole software kind of stack on top of that. This is something I'm willing to explore. I've still not got there yet, but you can see quite a few of them come up in the recent days. I think one of them is called Fit Genius. It's a fitness app with AI and LLM prediction, and there's many such apps basically. So yeah, maybe one day I'll give it a shot.
Okay. So do you have a list of apps that you have in mind that you're trying to figure out, you're exploring?
So starting with hardware before getting into the software, the next thing, so I have an Apple Watch. The next thing I want to get is a ring. So
Hmm.
it's either, I think it's called Ultra Human or Aura. Both of these have great softwares that pair with the ring, and both of them have great battery lives that last more than a week. And ring is a comfortable thing for me to wear when I sleep. Apple Watch I do
Versus a
not wear
watch.
when
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Apple Watch I do not wear when I sleep, so I lose the whole sleep tracking benefit of that. So that's on the hardware level. So I
Mm.
have a
That
smart
makes
weighing
sense.
scale, I have a smart watch. The next thing I want is a smart ring.
Mm.
On the software level, right now I'm syncing everything to Apple Health, which I also sync my fitness routines in the gym with Apple Fitness.
Mm-hmm.
So Apple right now stores all my health data, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to export that data to something that I can trust because it's health data. Right now, I prefer to do this not by like an open, ongoing synchronization. Rather, right now, I'm just comfortable for me to send it the data. And that's why I use ChatGPT for now.
Mm.
But once I develop trust in like these kind of AI softwares, especially because it's health data,
Mm.
I'm going to start using some app that takes care of the health side of things, the physical health side of things.
Mm.
And on the mental health, I've just been playing with ChatGPT for now. That's something that I'm not really looked in too deep with. I think the next thing I'm going to pick up on the mental health side of things is meditation or what's the other word? Mentalness, no, fullness, mindfulness activities using these apps.
Mm.
So there's an
Okay.
app called Balance that I've been exploring, and Calm. They sync with your watch, they track your heartbeat and adapt the meditation session to
Mm.
what you're feeling basically, or
All
your levels
right.
of stress. Because
All
sometimes when
right.
you're too stressed, you can't just jump into a meditation session. You
Mm.
need to start with a little bit of energy and then lower your energy little by little.
Mm. Okay. Just doing a random check here. When you go through explore your fitness world and exploring, this wellness aspect or making yourself better, does the manosphere or Andrew Tate ever show up in that sort of realm? Like, does it guide you into that Reddit, community? I'm just curious, just random, like how does that come into
Surprisingly,
play?
not once has
Okay,
Andrew Tate come up in my feed. He's come up on my Instagram feed because my school friend interviewed him. Apart
interesting.
apart from that, I've had no mention of Andrew Tate anywhere in this because I think a lot of what I've done is not use traditional search engines. I've used LLM-based search engines.
Okay,
So I skip the virality of things and go directly to the problems I want to solve. And quite
okay.
often when I'm exploring something as basic as how do I lift or something, it takes me to some unknown video which just has like 10,000 views or something. And so I think that's one good thing about this LLM. Like it breaks your echo chamber kind of nature.
I was just exploring that bit, whether it actually guides people into a certain echo chamber. So it must be something else that brings into play.
There are different echo chambers that I get plugged into, right? So I'm really into saunas and cold plunges at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I get into the echo chamber of how sauna is great for everything in your life. And all you need is sauna. You don't need anything else. I get into echo chambers about how ice is good for you, like the Wim Hof kind of echo chambers.
Yep.
But, like you recognize those and you move along.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay, awesome. I think that was a good 360 on health. Just one thing I want to maybe say before we end, not as a conclusion or something like that, but more about at least where I approach this whole health aspect of things. Part of me like is still very close to the Indian culture, and in the Indian culture you have the yoga
Mm-hmm.
aspect of things. And yoga itself comes in four families: hatha. You have the karma yoga, you have the breathing kind of yoga, and the mental kind of yoga. And it explores various forms of well-beings. And within those forms of well-beings, the yoga theories basically break your body down into chakras.
Mm.
And this is not particularly the physical self per se. It is a balance of, I mean, it is across the physical, mental, and spiritual sense of things.
Mm.
And there's a nice breakup of these, let's say, seven chakras.
Mm.
And some of them are responsible for your physical activeness. Some of them are responsible for your mental activeness. Some of them are responsible for your sexual activity
Mm.
or vitality, let's say. And it's about how, like, the whole aspect of yoga is how you unlock these chakras and how you unlock them in a sustainable way. So if you unlock one chakra completely and the other chakras are blocked, you basically have too much of a certain energy, is what the spiritual sciences, at least in Hinduism, say. And I think this has a parallel to a lot of what we're doing in the modern world. At least that's the way I'm approaching this subject. And it's about how we balance the various aspects of health. Some of that could be in fulfillment, success. Some of that could be in mental health and surviving through the day-to-day in a corporate world. Some of that could be in your physical health and making sure your physical body is at a place where it can deal with the mental stress. And some of that could be feeding your sexual side, which is often overlooked, especially if you're again in a super high energy corporate role. And the other aspect is also about friends, family, and how you maintain other kinds of happy relationships in your life, right?
Yeah.
And I think this holistically is in the past we had the yogic sciences, we had various other sciences, we had modern medicine, and I think a combination of all this and a layer of intelligence on top of that with AI is the way forward.
Just thinking about this when you said this is more of a holistic balance thing, and I wonder if ChatGPT actually will veer you towards not just one thing but multiple things. And in a way, just seeing how the prompting results are, they try to explore as much as possible, like giving you everything in terms of what is, wellness, etc. Yeah, I think this is a great start, because I'm just thinking how American culture, right, are too focused to like a single fix, right? Like the Atkins diet, for example. It just goes into these fads, and it's just one thing as opposed to many things that people just dedicate themselves to. They think it's optimizing to focus when you should be actually dealing with many, many other things, as you say. Whereas the Eastern culture, yeah, it's about, classically yin and yang, make sure you balance everything out. Incorporate
And
I think
the Western world and the medicine with now AI coming into the picture is balancing things out quite a bit. Because you optimize for a certain metric and you realize you cannot optimize for it without optimizing for another metric. And then that opens up the space, and eventually you have the 7 forms of well-being, and then awfully similar to yoga, for example. So I feel like the East and the West meet in AI land.
Or more like AI will determine which one is better. And the Eastern philosophy is more of balancing, meaning prevention. Like, to prevent illness is to be healthy. And whereas Western society is more reactive. I'm just like more short-term thinking, where just react, and then afterwards I'll just take a pill for this, for example, or just deal with it afterwards.
But we have to recognize that kind of reactiveness is often required for very surgical interventions. And the Western world the Western family of medicine is over-optimized to that, but for the right reasons. And that's what has got us to this point where we can live till the 80s. And now is the time where we look beyond that. Okay, now that we've extended our lifespan as humanity to a certain point, what's the next step to live happily, So I think that's where the balance of both of these philosophies come into play.
Yes. Well summarized.
And on that note, folks, goodbye.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you.
You could.